Good afternoon and welcome. I am Ann Peters from the Pulitzer Center, and I'm glad you are joining us today to formally launch the 1619 Project Law School Initiative with the first in a series of events. As we wait for more of our audience to join us, please let us know in the chat where you're listening in from. Please also know if you'd like to tweet, we are using the hashtag 1619lawschools. The Pulitzer Center is a nonprofit journalism and education organization based in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to elevate public engagement with underreported issues through the direct support for journalism and through education and outreach programs. We support more than 170 reporting projects each year on global and local issues. At pulitzercenter.org, we bring together this work also by themes, including racial justice, environment, migration, public health, and more. Our education programming spans elementary schools to graduate degree programs and outreach to the broader public. We have developed a strong university program connecting journalists with campuses in person and now virtually. We also award reporting fellowships every year to students from our university partners, now more than 35. Our conversation today came about through a project that aligns with our education mission and goals, the 1619 Project that commemorates the 400th anniversary of the time when 20 enslaved Africans arrived on a ship in Point Comfort, Virginia. It examines slavery's legacy by reframing the way we understand the history and by focusing on the contributions of Black Americans to the nation. Journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones first imagined the 1619 Project, and it launched with the publication of a special issue of the New York Times Magazine in August 2019, with 18 essays from journalists, historians exploring the lasting impact of slavery on a range of issues from healthcare to the criminal justice system, from city planning and traffic patterns to American music. The magazine also included 15 creative works, and Hannah-Jones wrote the project's opening essay, The Idea of America, for which she won a 2020 Pulitzer Prize. Also part of the project are 5 podcast episodes. You can explore these online at pulitzercenter.org/1619, along with curricular resources developed by the Pulitzer Center as the education partner for the New York Times for this 1619 project. And today it is a pleasure that we're introducing one of our newest associated programs, the 1619 Project Law School Initiative, a collaboration between the Pulitzer Center and Howard University School of Law and the University of Miami School of Law. This initiative focuses on curricular resources crafted by law school students and their professors to introduce the 1619 Project and spark frank conversations about the legacy of slavery in legal education. The aim of this collaborative work is to make the case for an interdisciplinary approach to legal studies that draws upon history, journalism, and public discourse, and to create better lawyers and a more just society. I just want to provide a few logistics before we move on to our speakers for today. For those of you in our audience, we wanted to let you know that you can provide questions for our speakers. So please use the Q&A icon on your screen, and you can begin adding your questions at any time throughout the remarks, as soon as something comes to mind. The chat icon should be used just for tech questions. Note that all of our attendees are muted, but if you can't hear us, please let us know via the chat. We also wanted to let you know that we are recording the session to post online for others who could not join us today. And we'll also have a brief survey once our session ends. We are grateful to John Oberdorfer, president of the Squire Patton Boggs Foundation, and Rodney Slater, the foundation's board chair, all of the law students and faculty at the University of Miami and Howard University who contributed their time, skills, and foresight to craft these modules. Thanks also goes to my colleagues at the Pulitzer Center, Kayla Edwards and Kem Sawyer, who kept us moving forward to where we are today. And now I'd like to introduce our 2 colleagues from Howard and Miami. Carmia Caesar, the Howard University School of Law Assistant Dean of Career Services, and Marnie Lennon, the Assistant Dean for Public Interest and Pro Bono at the University of Miami Law School and Founder Director of the Hope Public Interest Resource Center. Welcome.
Thank you, Anne. On behalf of both Marnie and myself, I want to echo all of the thanks to the Pulitzer Center and the phenomenal team of Ann Peters, Kim Sawyer, and Kayla Edwards, who helped move us through to this point. Marnie and I were, I guess, the benefits of being in the right place at the right time with the same concerns and the same excitement about, I'd say the same concerns about a legal curriculum and the same excitement about the Pulitzer 1619 project. At a time when our country has gone through a recent social reckoning, I think, with the events of last summer, and certainly even more recently, questions about the sanctity of the rule of law. Our role as attorneys, as educators, and stewards of the systems that govern is more pertinent than ever. And so this project that allowed students to come together with such a phenomenal set of resources and expand its reach through the creation of modules that can be inserted in whole or in part to law school courses and curricula is just phenomenal. And so thank you to the Pulitzer Center, thank you to the Squire Patton Boggs Foundation, and thank you to our talented students from the University of Miami School of Law and Howard University School of Law, who gave of themselves tirelessly to bring this project to fruition. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Secretary Slater, who is going to make some opening remarks.
Well, before he does, I just want to share a couple notes about former secretary, because to have the context of your walk, and thank you so much, Carmia, for those words that symbolize the phenomenal opportunity that we've had through this partnership. I want to echo those thanks and also share with you that it is a complete privilege to introduce Rodney Slater, a partner at Squire Patton Boggs and chair of the Squire Patton Boggs Foundation, former Secretary of Transportation. And just give a little note on you before you do what you do so beautifully. A graduate of the University of Arkansas Law School, former Secretary Slater led as the president of the Black Law Students Association and the Student Bar. We are joined today by so many students, and I want to signal the leadership that started in the classroom and beyond the classroom to set the tone in educational institutions. After law school, he served as an assistant attorney general and then joined then Governor Clinton's team and served in several leadership positions dedicated to community and minority affairs, and later the Arkansas Highway Commission. In 1993, he became the first African-American director of the Federal Highway Administration and later the Secretary of Transportation under President Clinton. I could go on for a long time about the leadership positions and the way in which he has engaged and contributed, but I will just share a few of the honors that he has been given for his incredible work and dedication. His work over the years has earned him recognition in being named one of the most influential Black Americans by Ebony Magazine, the Arkansas Hero Award, the President's Award from the National Bar Association, and the Lamplighter Award for Public Service by the Black Leadership Forum. Serving on boards to enhance communities near and far, including the Smithsonian Institution, the Urban League, and more, he has contributed his time, energy, and skill set to facilitate change. Former Secretary Slater serves as the chair of the Squire Patton Boggs Foundation, which has for over 20 years dedicated itself to supporting public policy fellows, law students who are put into agencies to facilitate change and learn how to be effective problem solvers. A lifelong leader and learner, his authentic commitment to the betterment of society and problem solving, and his unique capacity to inspire makes him the perfect person to launch our initiative today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Marnie. I very much appreciate those words of introduction. And let me say to you, Assistant Dean Lennon, and to Assistant Dean Carmia Caesar, we really appreciate the leadership that the two of you have provided, along with the students from your respective law schools. And we're in for a treat later on in the program as we hear from those students. And let me also thank you and all of the leaders there at the Pulitzer Center for the wonderful leadership that you're providing to this initiative dealing with law schools, but also your work and support of Nicole Hannah-Jones and her colleagues at the New York Times as they put forth this wonderful and significant 1619 project, as you noted, commemorating the 400th anniversary of the arrival of those 20-odd souls at Port Comfort, Virginia. It is an honor for me to be a part of this launch, if you will, of a series of sessions on the part of the 1619 Project Law School Initiative. As you've noted, it will explore legal education in the context of the 1619 Project. And law students and faculty members will have the opportunity to really engage on some of the critical issues of our times as relates to race and as relates to our efforts quest to become this more perfect union, if you will. Just this week, I received a very special gift from my wife and daughter. It was a book called 400 Souls. This is a book that is edited by Ibrahim Kinde and Keisha N. Bland. And it deals with this period of 1619 to 2019. And it focuses on the lives and experiences of people across this great sweep of time. And what I found most profound is that in the beginning, it's really a story about two ships. Mr. Kinde sort of breaks into the foreword as he talks about the significance of this collection of people to write about this extensive period and to deal with some of the untold stories about the American story to bring us, again, closer to understanding who we are and what we're really about. And then in that opening paragraph or beginning of the book, Nicole Hannah-Jones talks about two great ships that came to America. And she begins with talking about one that landed in 1620 and how the more than 100 or so souls on that ship, we know their names, we know their histories, and we know now that their descendants take great pride in their arrival. They landed at Plymouth Rock, and the name of that great ship was the Mayflower. And then she goes on into the story of another ship that landed, actually the year before, 1619, at Port Comfort, Virginia. And she goes on to say that we know very little and not enough, but we seek to know more about that group. Some 20 odd in number, so insignificant it seems at the time to even have a clear sense of just how many, let alone who. But then she hastens to talk about an individual who I had the honor of meeting some years ago, Lerone Bennett Jr., who in his book, Before the Mayflower, written in 1962, said, "Few ships before or since have unloaded a more momentous cargo than this ship, the White Lion." And he goes on to talk in his book about their story. And this 1619 initiative is designed to help us understand and appreciate their story as a part of the American story. I'm reminded now of the words of Thoreau, who said, it matters not so much what you look at, but what you see. It's so unfortunate that as we look back, we see the Mayflower, but we don't see the White Lion as we should. This 1619 Law School initiative is designed to spark just that kind of conversation about the legacy of slavery and the law. You know, last year around the 4th of July, I penned an op-ed that appeared in USA Today, and it talked about Frederick Douglass and his effort and his time to capture the tension of this discussion of the promises made and the dreams deferred. And we talk about his speech that was given in 1852. It was the day after the 4th of July celebration, but he talked about the 4th of July celebration. And he talked about in stark terms this issue of patriotic hypocrisy. And he basically styles the speech, what to the slave is the 4th of July? And he says, I have to admit that this 4th is yours and it's not mine. He said, I have to admit that this 4th reminds me more than any other day of the promises made and the dreams deferred. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that when he posed the great question, are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? It was a question to be answered not only for those for whom he spoke, but also by those to whom he spoke. Because the us he was speaking of was those denied, as well as those who had to bear the burden of the denial, especially when you think about the promise of the 4th of July. He actually goes on to say, the 4th of July is really the first great fact of our nation's history, the very ringbolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. He was saying the story has begun, but it is not yet finished. And it's the promise of the chapters yet to be written that really speak to the promise of the nation. And let me hasten to a close by saying that when he uttered these words, 1852, it was 5 years before the infamous Dred Scott decision, 1857, where the United States Supreme Court talked about Dred Scott and his kind, if you will, having no rights for whom or for which the white man was bound to even be concerned. But 5 years earlier, Frederick Douglass, though looking at his people yet enchained, was not at all defeated. Though his head bloodied, it was not at all bowed. His speech, not only given 5 years before Dred Scott, was given 10 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. Yet he still had hope. And even when we think about Dred Scott, actually 100 years before the Central High Crisis that tested the Brown decision, that was argued by Thurgood Marshall, a distinguished alum of Howard University Law School. And then the Little Rock Nine, actually represented by Wiley Branton, a future dean of the Howard Law School and a graduate of the Howard Law School and a graduate of my law school, the University of Arkansas School of Law. The case Cooper versus Aaron, notwithstanding those roads yet to walk and those hills yet to climb, there was this sense of optimism that the dream could be made real. I remember when President Clinton was giving his first inaugural address, he said, "There is nothing bad about America that can't be corrected by that which is good about America." And a young voice, a much younger voice, actually had the same thing to say to us just a few weeks ago. When young Amanda Gorman rose to the podium, much like we invite our young people today to step forward, as the students who will come later will surely do, she stepped forward and she brought forth the spirit of her ancestors, as we do with this project, bringing forth the spirit of ours. And in her poem, "The Hill We Climb," she said, as she had completed it the night after the assault on our nation's capital and the cathedral of our democracy, she said, "Somehow we've weathered and we've witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished." The 1619 project for law schools, as well as the one for the education of our students in our schools across the country, it affords us to arm ourselves with the knowledge to finish this job of making our nation a more perfect union.
Thank you, Secretary Slater, for those moving words. And what a perfect point to transition to our law students who are here today. Senna, Ariana, Maddie, and Mike, we can't wait to hear from you. And I think so perfect again, Senna, that we are going to be featuring some of the slides from the 1619 piece on hope as we hear from you.
Thank you, Secretary Slater and Dean Caesar and everyone else who has joined us today. My name is Mike. I'm a 3L at Howard University School of Law, and I'm pleased to be a part of a 4-person panel that we have here today for you of students who have worked on this project, and we just want to share our experiences with you today. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to introduce ourselves through brief testimonials, speaking about why we're here and how the process was for us. And then we'll move on to a more inclusive roundtable discussion between each other, talking about some of the things that we thought you might be interested in as an audience. And all the while, I really hope that you all utilize the Q&A function here and ask some questions that you're interested in. And when we wrap up our discussion, we want to move on to some of the questions that you have for us. And so without further ado, I will ask Ariana to kick us off. Introduce yourself, Ariana, and also tell us why you're here.
Sure. Thanks so much for that, Mike. So my name is Ariana Abulafia. I am one of the former, now Miami law students who had the honor of being involved in this project. I'm now currently an attorney. I'm a public defender here in Miami. But when I got started with the project, which is actually just about a year ago, I was a third-year law student. And really kind of the way that I got involved was Miami Law is one of the schools that has a dedicated public interest resource center. And I was heavily involved in that. And that's kind of how I got the opportunity to begin this project. And, you know, I reflect a lot these days about just how much has changed since I began this project, how much things have changed for everyone in the past year from last February to this February. But one of the things that hasn't changed is, the reason why I got involved, and the reason, which is really kind of an extension of the reason why I went to law school and the reason why I do the work that I do. So that's kind of what I wanted to begin by sharing with you. And I was involved with the project, again, kind of from its beginnings, as far as the law school curriculum part of it goes. What drew me to the project was an opportunity to share works that had totally changed my perspective, informed my career goals, and to share those with other law students, some of whom may already be kind of like-minded or on that sort of path, and some of whom may not be. I really believe in the power and the importance of teaching history, political science, social science, and the law honestly. To me, that means teaching it within context. I think the 1619 law school curriculum really tries to bring some of that context and that honesty to the table. And that as a result, it helps create law school graduates, some of whom then become lawyers, who are more informed. And they're not informed necessarily or more informed about, the law as a static concept, but about how and why laws came to be, and also what the impact of laws is. And I think that from that informed perspective, law students, law graduates, and lawyers become more effective advocates. Regarding process, it was a really interesting process to work on this during a pandemic and a time when, a lot of things as far as how we do work changed. It was an honor to get to work with other Miami law students and Howard law students. And I think that one of the things that the technology does is allow us to work with law students from across the country. And for that, I'm really grateful. I kind of started out this process by thinking about the most impactful works that I had read in undergrad and in law school, inside and outside of the classroom. For me, that began with Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. And I kind of thought about what would be the best way to share them with others. I thought about my favorite classes in law school. I thought about my favorite professors, the one I thought were the most effective. And I thought about, if I were that professor, how would I structure these conversations? And I built the modules really with that in mind. And, for the future, I see the 1619 law school curriculum as a starting place. I see it something that provides tools for folks who want to teach or learn about topics like mass incarceration, law and politics, and public health from accurate and relevant perspectives. I hope that this is a starting place for the project. I hope it continues to be expanded upon. I hope its legacy is a reminder that even something that may seem inflexible or unadaptable, like the legal academy, can be changed and updated to be inclusive and honest. And with that, I turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Ariana. And next we will have Asena. Why don't you introduce yourself, Asena?
Thanks, Mike. Hey, everyone. My name is Asena Lilywater Tuiane. I am a proud 3L at Howard University School of Law with Dean Caesar and Mike and all of my fellow hustlers who are online with us now. Shout out to you all. Good to see you. I will be practicing public interest law in New York come August, and I'm currently quarantining in Oakland, California. So I'm going to talk about my why and my process. So my purpose here in law school includes empowering those who have been silent. So for me, it was a no-brainer to work on the 1619 project because our law school curriculum is inadequate. It doesn't critically examine the state of the law in relation to our history, nor has it evolved to consider our current state, thus inadequately preparing us to legally advocate for our brothers and sisters. Slavery is all of our legacy, Black, brown, white, yellow, and we need to support all efforts which center and excavate our shared history. Generally, formative educational experiences exclude the stories of my communities, our communities, and law school does the same. So for me, participating in this project was personal. It was a necessary part of my law school story, my healing, and my advocacy. And I'm so happy to be here with you all. A little bit about my process. I was able to collaborate with Maddie, who you'll hear from in a little bit. She's a rock star from Miami. And we worked on curriculum surrounding the beautiful photo essay Hope by Jenaba Ajuyom and the text by Nicole Hannah-Jones. I'll give a second for you all to see some of these beautiful visuals. So first off, I was in love with the pictures from the essay because, as you can see, they're beautiful. But also when I was a 1L, these Howard Law students were 3Ls. And they were student leaders who I looked up to, each and every one of them. And so their photo essays touched on their personal legacies with slavery. The caption was, as you can see here, their ancestors were enslaved by the law. Today, they are graduates of the nation's preeminent historically Black law school. I'll let that sink in for one moment. So to see their stories, their passions, their why, their motivation, family histories, their wins, their aspirations, to see all of that in print in such a meaningful way was very touching and inspiring. And Nicole Hannah-Jones, she ends the photo essay saying that these graduates represent nothing less than their ancestors' wildest dreams.
Thank you, Asena.
You're welcome.
And now we will have Maddie.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Maddie Seals, and like Ariana, I'm a recent 2020 graduate of Miami Law, and I'm so happy to be here with you all. So like Asena, I went to law school to work in public interest, and the first year was almost completely devoid of talk about social justice. And by that, I mean race, class, those kinds of topics in the classroom. And subjects like torts and property and contracts seemed very dry and completely irrelevant to why I was in law school. So it was only after myself and a classmate formed a critical legal theories reading group my second year of law school that I realized how important these subjects, torts, property, and contracts, are to working for a better world, and how integral in social justice legal conversations they are. And that the way that they can be taught is does a real disservice to both the subjects and first year law students. So when I got invited to work on the 1619 project, I thought this would be a great opportunity to add something to this alternative and critical view of the law that scholars have paved the way for us to do, especially because it's focused on being Black in America, and it's also not grounded in the law, but in a broader view of history and society. And like Asena was saying, we got to work together on the Hope photo essay. It was so beautiful. And my process really kind of revolved around first what the articles provoked in me, and then thinking back on whether this had been addressed in law school. So the Hope piece really made me think about constitutional law and the struggle for integration, Brown versus Board, and how that plays out at the law school level, including the decline of historically Black colleges and universities, law schools over time, and kind of what that means and working towards a future with more Black lawyers. And then with the traffic piece I also got to work on by Kevin Cruz, it really gave me the opportunity to think about how mass incarceration, segregation, and climate change all intersect. Again, something that wasn't really addressed in law school in the classes that I took. And I think this just shows the importance of getting out of the law to look at the intersectionality of things sometimes. And my hope for this curriculum is that it gives both professors and students a jumping off point to being more expansive in their study and teaching of the law and their critiques of the law and legal education. It's so important for future law students, regardless of what type of law they end up practicing, to understand the full implications of the power of each and every part of the law, and to be able to think critically about who creates it and who dispenses the knowledge about it. And I think the 1619 project curriculum is a step towards making that happen. And I'm so grateful to have been able to work on it and happy to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Maddie. And last but not least, I will round us out. My name is Mike, as I said, Mike Walker. I am a 3L at Howard University School of Law. And when I first started choosing law schools, I decided that Howard was really the only choice for me, because I wanted to learn the law with the Black experience in America in mind. And while Howard does offer many courses specifically with that intent, I believe that we can expand. They say that history is told by the victors, and that is certainly the case when considering the tragedies experienced by Black people at the hands of systemic racism and the ritualistic forgetting that our history books have engaged in. The law is interdisciplinary at heart. It requires its practitioners to become familiar with a host of subject matters. And given these truths, I believe that law schools must integrate critical race and intersectional study into their core programming if they hope to achieve the goal of holistic legal edification. And I believe that is the goal of the 1619 Law School Initiative. And for me, the best part of the process was working with and getting to know a student with similar values as me, who attends a completely different law school. We worked on an essay about mass incarceration. And I believe at this point, that's a topic that's pretty ubiquitous in and outside of legal circles. But it was really cool just to see how much we both knew about the topic. And this felt like the literature and the media around the issue, they really did make a huge impact on all of us. But moving forward, I would like to see that every law school across the country implement some of the supplemental information into classes like civil procedure and constitutional law. The topics that these courses cover have huge implications for Black communities and communities of color in general. Just as attorneys must know the case law and the legal theories behind the law, they also must know and understand the direct and downstream effects of the law on our communities. The supplements that we've helped to make are just the beginning. And I expect that others will come and they will come behind us and come together to improve upon the work that we've done. And when we all are able to understand and realize our potential, I think that is when we are both, all of us are at our strongest. And with that, we'll move on, I think, now to our roundtable discussion. So if all of the law students could join me, and we will kick that off. So we only have a couple of questions that we really want to discuss here, but we want to really talk about, what we're going to do now. And I think the first question that I want to ask all of you is, what is some advice regarding gaining institutional support for students attempting to start something like this at their school? And whether it's a reading group or if it's a whole curriculum that's being supplemented into one of or multiple classes, what's something that people can do right now to get that jump started? And I want to come to Maddie first on this one.
Sure. So I think that at Miami, we were very fortunate to have a lot of institutional support from Dean Lennon and the Hope Office, but also many of the 1L students that participated in our reading group took the articles to their professors and were able to integrate those articles or get topics added to their classes, property and contracts, I believe, or civil procedure. There was a lot of support at Miami for including these issues and topics into the 1L curriculum. And also one of the things about when starting a reading group, I think is important, is to talk about strategies of getting this done and getting institutional support and approaching your professors and talk about those strategies. I think that was one of our biggest successes last year in the reading group and in getting those changes to 1L courses. And for those people that don't know where to start. I mean, I really think that this curriculum, the 1619 project, is a great starting point. I mean, it's so easy. And to be able to take this to your professors and be like, here, we have something from the Pulitzer Center. These are great articles. These are questions that we think would fit really well, is going to be really amazing for starting a reading group. And then getting that reading group, you know, more impactful in like the larger law school curriculum changes and stuff like that.
Thank you, Maddie. Well, I will say that Asena and I actually have a little bit of experience with this, not too much, but we actually were able to participate in a webinar that we organized with students from a number of different law schools over the summer, and so we actually have a recording of that. We can, if anyone's interested, we can get in contact and share that webinar. But we do also have some other resources as well for starting a reading group, as well as asking your administrations for support on and getting these types of readings into the classroom. And maybe Asena can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I just dropped a link in the chat. And so Mike and I worked with some fantastic law students this summer, and we just knew that we wanted to do something to make a difference. And so I would say advice-wise is just find your allies, like find people who are interested in creating these spaces, both like on your peer level, but also faculty and staff. And then be in it for the long haul. I know Maddie talked about being strategic. University of Miami is different from Howard. And so as you are strategic, you have to think about the long haul. And so figuring out what your win is going to be, you know, this year we're leaving out of Hustle, but who are going to be the next folks at Howard to kind of push forth institutionalizing a radical reading group at Howard is part of our discussion now. So yeah, there's always a space to sit down and chat with folks who are like-minded, and don't delay. Just do it. Get the education that you want.
Thank you, Asena. So now I'm wondering about, we have this idea about supplementing courses with this this other history, this other information that typically isn't in law school classrooms. But I kind of want to take a step outside the classroom and think about other programming that law schools offer, in particular extracurricular programs such as moot court, trial advocacy teams, and law journals. And I'm wondering if there's any way that we can think of to implement something like these curricula to support the kinds of missions that law journals and other extracurricular programs do. And so I want to turn to Ariana. Maybe Ariana has a couple words on this one.
I definitely do. Thanks, Mike. So one of the things that I was involved in at Miami Law School was I was the senior articles editor of the Race and Social Justice Law Review. And, you know, when I decided I wanted to be on a law review, it was race and social justice or nothing, right? Like that was what I wanted to do because I knew that was the type of thing that I wanted to write about. And, you know, as an executive board member, I had the ability to really help plan out things like orientation and all of those types of events for our member candidates and also for our 3L candidates, members rather, and also for the rest of us. So I definitely think that through programs like that, you can use this curriculum.
Thank you, Ariana. And I will say quickly, I think it's important, I think, for moot court teams to be thinking about the types of topics that they're choosing to go to competition. You know, there's obviously a lot of very subject matter specific topics that some people might think like, well, what does technology have to do with the type of work that the 1619 project is about. But at the same time, when you think about it, all of these things that we have, including technology, affects the systemic racism, the history of oppression that the United States has participated in. And so I think when it comes to those topics, it's important to bring in those angles and understand who those things really affect. And so I think there's maybe one more question that I have to pose to the group. And that's really kind of moving forward and looking forward and thinking, like, how does the 1619 project really relate to your plans as a future attorney? And I'd like to ask Senna to maybe provide a word for that.
Sure. So Mike, you know me, I'm a community person. I've been doing activist oriented work in New York and in California since law school. And I plan to continue to do that and work in policy reform. And so the 1619 project is something that I will carry with me and advocate for and continue to talk about with folks. Beyond, because I think it's such it has potential to really help transform the state of law school education. I think it's a beginning. I think Secretary Slater talked about it, but everything has a beginning point, and I'm excited that I've been able to help start this process, and will do all I can to continue to push it.
Thanks, Senna. Maddie, what about you? How do you think that the 1619 project will benefit you as an attorney?
I think that while my job is going to be as a public defender, I think outside of that, working on this project and working on curricular reform at an institutional level has really given me a lot of hope in what can be done, and in some of my other organizational and institutional work with lawyers and adjusting systems. This process has really, it's given me a lot of hope that I think I can continue forward, and also a really newfound interest in legal education, and perhaps including that at some point as part of my career. I did not enter law school thinking that I would be interested in that, but now, because of this work, I'm very interested in potentially making that a part of my career.
Great, thank you. Now, I want to take a question from the Q&A actually now, and try to rope everybody in on this, because I think this is a really interesting one. So the question is if you could reimagine legal education from the ground up, what would it look like? And so that's obviously like a very, very big question, and I'm sure you could write a dissertation on that. But I'm just thinking that, one of the themes I think is that runs through all of our experiences is that, there's limitations that we just kind of assume are built into the legal education apparatus. And so if we were able to change something about that in order to make it more amenable to the work that we're interested in doing, into having a more holistic education with the racialized history of the United States, how would that look? And I'm going to put Asena on the spot for this one first, because I know that she has a very, very deep background in some alternative education possibilities.
And Mike, maybe you and I can dialogue about this. I feel like we've talked about this question, like, what should law school really look like? I think we've talked about like maybe it just being 2 years, but all of that aside, that's an exciting question. Thank you, whoever posed that. I think for me, reimagining law school education would be centered around community work, right? To me, the role of a lawyer, when I came to Hustle, I really take the social engineering part of my education seriously. And if you're not a social engineer, then you're a parasite. And I think we have the privilege to become lawyers, and we have to be connected to what's happening in the community. And so I imagine that first year, starting with constitutional law, I think we learned that a little bit later, but some of those core subjects and utilizing those skills and to advocate inside of our communities. And so at Howard, we should be working, everyone would be required to do work with young people, with folks who are incarcerated that first year, and do that sooner than later. Yeah, that's my initial thought. I think that maybe we should start a law school. Just kidding.
I love it. I love it. What about you, Ariana?
Yeah, this is something I have a lot of thoughts on as well. I'm definitely someone who has considered being a law school professor. So like I kind of really love law school. That's like kind of an unpopular opinion, but I really did love law school. And the thing that I've learned really throughout this pandemic, right, is that we used to have all of these ideas about what law school needed to look like, right? Like it had to be folks in a room. It had to be one professor up top. It had to be Socratic, right? And all of a sudden we learned that actually that's not what law school is about, right? That's not the core value. That's not the most important thing, right? And I think that what this curriculum kind of tries to do is to infuse core values of how to build advocates and to build advocates, right? And this is kind of going back to my reason for getting involved. To build advocates, you need to teach honestly, you need to teach contextually. So I think for me, on one end, right, we are at this really exciting time. It's a really exciting time to be in law school. It's a really exciting time to be a lawyer, right? Because I think that things are changing. And I think this is an opportunity to reimagine what law school can look like. And for me, what that's about maybe kind of brushing away these things that we once felt had to be there, and focusing on the core values. And to me, the core values is, how can we best build effective, passionate, and compassionate advocates? And I think that this curriculum is a really good place to start. And going off of what Asena said as well, I think that infusing pragmatism and practical lawyering into law school is a great thing to do too. And that is definitely something that Miami Law really tries to do and does very well. The reason that I was exposed to being a public defender, on the ground, not just like in a book, was because of the Hope Office and because of our institutional support for public interest, as Maddie was talking about before. So I think that we're at this time when we're recognizing what law school can be, and it's exciting.
That's great. These are really great thoughts. We have another question, and I think this is also a pretty good one, because I personally am a practically minded person, and I think this question gets at the what's actually happening in reality. And so I want to go to Maddie first on this one. And I'm wondering if you found that since doing this work with the 1619 project, obviously reading the New York Times publication, but also working on our specific project, and have you attempted to implement any sort of supplements into the curriculum at the University of Miami's law school? And has there been acceptance, pushback? Have there been hurdles? Like, what do you think the climate is in accepting this type of curriculum at your school?
So I actually graduated before I started working on this project. So I haven't seen, it in practice at Miami Law, but I can say, speaking to when we did the reading group, I think that the pushback, I think if there is any pushback, the most is going to come from students that don't think that this is necessarily important or is a distraction from what they want, why they're in law school and what they want to do for the future. I know that that's a challenge that many of my friends that are interested in public interest law and social justice have in law school, particularly in the 1L curriculum. So that's kind of where I would imagine some difficulties may be. But like I said, our professors, the professors that a lot of students approached, last year with stuff from our reading group, were receptive to adding stuff to their syllabi and changing their curriculum and addressing these topics.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and I think that's probably not a unique experience in the sense that like we said, law schools are kind of set in their ways, and even at a place like Howard where the entire mission is to make sure that this generally forgotten history is still part of our work. Even here, I think for us it's a question of, well, we already kind of have that, you know what I mean? Like what else do you want? And I think that pushback is really just a conservative one, in the sense that everybody expects a certain output from law students going into the working world, and so every law school is kind of calibrated themselves to saying, like, this works, this is our curriculum, it allows us to produce students who become productive attorneys. But I think that mindset, it doesn't allow for innovation and growth. And so I would say that at Howard, one of the challenges for us has been just kind of feeling like we have to be the ones who create the convincing argument to say, like, this is necessary information that every student should be aware of, and also and should be inculcated in every single subject matter, no matter whether it's towards or a specific critical race theory class. And so I think that inherent conservatism and how law schools are run is probably a big part of any sort of stagnation in allowing these programs to actually move forward. And I see Asena shaking her head yes, because she definitely agrees. And we've definitely talked about this too. And so I think we're going to wrap up now. And I want to thank everyone on this panel for obviously the work that you've already put in, but also and taking the time out today and having this discussion. I think it was really good. And hopefully we're able to answer everyone's questions. And of course, the Pulitzer Center will be around to answer any further questions. And so I think we will have just some closing remarks from Ann Peters, and thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you all too. We so appreciate this conversation, and much thanks to Secretary Slater, the deans, Caesar and Dean Lennon, and of course all of you who did the real heavy lifting of thinking, writing up the modules. We're just really appreciate all of your work, Asena, Mike, Maddie, and Ariana. So thank you.
Yes.
And thanks also. Oh, did you want to say something, Rodney?
Yes, just quickly, Ann. I think that there were a lot of challenges offered forth that our law firm should step forward and be supportive of. I'm going to talk to John Oberdorfer about this. I don't want to speak out of turn, but he has such a good relationship with John Sawyer that we think they can continue to work magic, because we've all been inspired by what we've heard today.
Very true. Thank you so much. And for your support and for the support from the foundation and the Dean's Circle.
Our pleasure.
And of course, our audience, very grateful for your time with us as well. I want to thank also Kayla Edwards and Holly Piepenberg, our producers. Just a quick note, we are a Pulitzer Center is a nonprofit, so we really depend on donor support. We also have a brief survey that we'll have here at the very end, so if you can just hold on for a few moments and take that, we'd be most appreciative of it. As a reminder, this, as we mentioned, this is the first in our series, and next week on March 3rd, Wednesday, we'll have the second in the series for the 1619 Project Law School Initiative, and we'll be focusing on public health and racial justice. At that time, we'll be joined by journalist Linda Villarosa, a contributing writer to the New York Times Magazine, whose work is featured in that August special edition. Please visit our website to register, and also feel free to share further this information, both on the curriculum, this conversation of which we'll be having a recording of, and of the upcoming events. So once again, thank you all for being with us today and contributing to this conversation, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.